Record. Welcome to another edition of Trail Runner Nation. My name is Don Freeman.
And I'm Scott Warr. What if aging wasn't something to fight, but actually something to anticipate and to look forward to? Welcome to the Aging Athlete series. It's a special series here at Trail Runner Nation where we are exploring how the passage of time shapes us, not just as runners, Don Freeman, but maybe as whole humans. Whether you're in your 20s, 30s, or you're pushing into your 70s or 80s, this series is about finding longevity, joy, and strength on the trail and at every stage of life. Co-hosted, we're welcomed again by Krissy Moehl. She's a two-time UTMB champion from 2003 and 2009. She's the youngest woman to ever complete the Grand Slam of ultra running back in 2005. We just found out, or were reminded, that she killed it at Hard Rock 100, which we're recording this just the week after Hard Rock. But she won that back in 2007 and was third place overall, following in the footsteps of Scott Jurek and Carl Meltzer, right? Is that right? So that's a good trio for you to be finishing with in that 2007 Hard Rock. She's a coach, she's an author, she's a longtime race director of the Chuckanut 50K. She brings decades of experience and insight to these specific conversations about aging athlete. And she also has kind of a really deep curiosity, which is fun to see her mind work. Every 5 or 6 weeks, we're going to have a new aging athlete episode where we'll invite runners, coaches, scientists, nutritional experts to unpack how we train and recover during different shifts in our age, what it means to fuel this changing body, why motivation ebbs and flows, and how to adjust without giving up on what we love. We're going to talk about some hard stuff. We're not saying that we have all the answers, but we're going to try to provide some answers. So you need to do the experiment of one here, fellows and ladies. This is the 5th episode in this mini-series, and we're talking about how to adapt your training plans as you age from the late teen years all the way through your 90s and beyond. Coach and seasoned and seemingly ageless athlete Jeff Browning is joining us today.
Now, Jeff Browning is a legendary ultramarathon runner, widely respected for his longevity, his grit, and his tactical brilliance on the trails. Known in the trail ultra community as the name Bronco Billy. Jeff has built a reputation for pushing the boundaries of human endurance across some of the sport's most grueling events. At Western States 100, one of the most grueling competitive ultras, Jeff has consistently delivered top-tier performances. Top 10 finishes 4 consecutive years, 2016 through 2019, and very recently, 2025, talking about longevity. The 2025 finished 29th overall, 18th in his division, and with a time of 19:12:58. His accomplishments span beyond Western States with wins and course records at some of the toughest ultras in the country: Hard Rock 100 in 2018, Moab 240, winter course record 2022, and multiple course records at the Bighorn 100 and Sedona Canyons 125. Jeff is also known for his racing prowess, but also for his role as a coach, innovator in endurance nutrition, and a symbol of durability in the sport where longevity is rare. Krissy?
Speaking of longevity, was your intro or my intro longer?
It was a tape finish. Is Jeff still with us?
I'm here.
He's aged during that intro.
Yeah, dude, I aged a whole nother year while that was going on.
Jeff, to tell you about longevity, you have a long set of credentials. It was hard to chop it down. What was I going to leave out?
I don't know, man. There's a lot there. I have to pinch myself sometimes.
Hey, thanks for joining us, Jeff.
Yeah, it's good to be here. And I have to say, I was there to witness Krissy's performance at Hard Rock in 2007.
Oh.
It was my first Hard Rock, and I was a newbie to that kind of altitude and terrain. I had done Bighorn twice, won it twice, got the course record. Those were my only 2 wins. And I came there in '07 with quite a cocky attitude. Went out right behind Jurek and Meltzer, and I blew up like halfway. And Krissy passed me coming out of Uray. She was with Darcy Africa and Darcy Paisu now. And all I could hear was girls chatting. This was the first time, another crazy note, that Jason Coop paced me from Uray to Telluride. It was his first time at Hard Rock, and he was like early 20s, had just started working for CTS, and had never been to Hard Rock. That was our first meeting. It was in 2007, and I was just hypoxic, beat up, walking up the road, up Camp Bird Road, and I hear chatty Cathy's coming up behind me, and it's Krissy and Darcy just motoring and talking up the road. So yeah, I slept at Chapman for 45 minutes. I finished in 33:18 that year for my worst 100 ever. So that was my intro to Hard Rock.
So that's part of an aging athlete, is overcoming the cockiness of our youth. Isn't that right, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, respect the distance, respect the terrain. Ultras definitely teach you some humility from time to time.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I wanted to bring Bronco on. Bronco and I have grown up together. I spent a lot of time in Smith Rock with him. I lived in Bend, Oregon for about a year and a half. And that's nearly 20 years ago, Bronco. I lived there in 2007. You don't even live there anymore. And I never really had to say much. I could ask a question and we would be entertained. I would be entertained for 2-3 hours. Maybe I'd grunt or prompt him with something else. And the only thing that stopped us was I would get these massive nosebleeds. And you said that I have a lot of curiosity. This guy and his wife do too. And we were able to work through my iron deficiency, and so that we wouldn't be stopped on the trail all the time. We go back further than that, though. When I was the promotions manager for Montreal, Bronco was on the running team, and that started in 2001. So we're going on a quarter century here, and talk about aging athletes. We've just, I like it. We've grown up together. I would go so far to say that you've always been a great runner and performed well, but what I think has been really cool is watching you in your latter years, these last 10, 15 years, really learn the lessons and change your body even. And I think we'll get into that a little bit on this, to be able to do this. And something, maybe that's a ability or a lead-in point on a first question, is I remember being down in Patagonia with you for the Mile for Mile filming, and there were some really funny clips of your belly. You were having some issues with digestion, and you even had a bit of a belly on you for being an ultra runner. And there was comments from Jen about it as well. And after that trip, I feel like that was a huge turning point. Maybe even in your competitiveness too. Would you call that point? And what age were you at that point?
So I was 43 at the time, I believe. This would have been like 2014 into 2015. Maybe even 42, maybe when we were in Patagonia. But then I went back in April to race Ultra Fjord in 2015. But 2015 was a really rough season for me. I had a lot of health issues that year. So I was having a major gut stuff. I don't know. It was probably, looking back, it was probably from drinking unfiltered water in Patagonia a ton, especially in the race at Ultra Fjord, because there were some very questionable spots. It wasn't that bad when we were there because it's summertime, but I was there in their late fall when it's raining and there's a lot of runoff.
I was there with you. I ran Ultra Fjord.
Oh, that's right. You ran the 100K. Yes.
Yeah.
So just a crazy conditions for that race. I was having issues that whole season after that trip. For me, I was a high carb athlete, had been one for 15 years, kind of the standard high carb diet, high carb approach. Back then I was pushing 100 grams of carbs an hour during races. Probably, some races I was taking up to 75 gels in 100 milers. And And so I just really was struggling, and it was a struggle bus year. I was kind of, I look back at photos and I was kind of inflamed, like systemically, like when I look back in hindsight. And that's at the end of that year, I did a bunch of research, started talking to Zach Bitter, and then he put me in touch with Peter Defty at Vespa. We started talking OFM, optimized fat metabolism, kind of becoming more a fat adapted athlete. I switched to a paleo diet, and I had already decided to do that before I got hold of Peter because I'd done so much research. I kind of stepped back and knew I was dealing with some kind of candida, like yeast overgrowth in my GI, and something was going on weird, and it was very imbalanced. And I decided I needed to quit feeding it sugar. So that meant low carb. And I didn't know how to do it. I just knew I needed to go more like grain-free, sugar-free in my everyday diet and lifestyle diet. And pushed back from about 30 hours of research one week and told my wife I needed to do paleo. And she's like, I have 2 cookbooks. And let's do it. She'd been wanting to do it for years. She was a little hypoglycemic. Carbs really affected her in a negative way, like bad headaches or crashes. And we had kind of started to figure that out maybe a few years before through an alternative nutritionist in Bend. But I had still been holding out because I needed my pasta for ultra running and my 75 gels in 100. So I wasn't willing to like back off. And that finally I had a need selfishly. And then in hindsight, I feel bad about that, but because I should have done it way earlier because she would have pushed me to it earlier if I'd been listening. But I wish wasn't there. Just like anything, you have to have kind of a revelation to make a life change. And I needed that at the time. And then I got hold that it might be a performance enhancer a little bit. And that got me really focused on like, oh, I can do this. If it's going to help my ultra running, then I'm all in. And so I've been all in for almost 10 years now on OFM approach. And go ahead, Krissy.
Oh, cool. Oh, do you want to go, Don? Go.
No, I just want to go back to your old belly for a second. Was it the type? Was it the type of belly that you could pinch an inch or two, or was it more of a bloated type of belly that you were carrying?
It was a little bit of both at times. I was getting more bloating than I ever had. I was having trouble getting down to my race weight. I always felt like I had I'm not anal about being on the scale, but I am as I get close to an A race, and I check in like once a week and see where I am. And I was having trouble. I naturally was able, just on a high carb diet, to get down to my kind of what I call my fighting weight, and for an A race. And I was having trouble doing that, 2-3 pounds shy. And I just was struggling during that time. And so it was a big change lifestyle wise, but it was a huge performance enhancer. I mean, if you look at my performances from 2016 on, they kind of speak for themselves.
Yeah, and that's right in that age group timing of the almost mid 40s, like early to mid 40s.
Yeah, 44 was when I officially kind of did it.
Cool. And that's what I brought. We're trying to focus each of these episodes, especially these first 6 ones, with some topics. And the reason I want to chat with you is with the coaching is like training plan adjustments. And there's lots of different ways Don, Scott, and I can take this. One like just way to get it started was mileage. Like as we're aging, is there an argument for increasing mileage, reducing mileage? Where do you go with your athletes? And have you coached athletes through various decades like that? Like one person through the decades, and or do you just see it in like some of your 20-year-olds versus some of your 50 or 60-year-olds?
Well, coaching really is individual, so it depends on their history and what they do. If they cross train, if they have a history in cycling, do they have a history in triathlon, those kind of backgrounds. So you have to take those things into account. You can't just start throwing someone on a bike when they've never ridden a bike without some kind of instruction on, proper seat height and technique and cadence and all kinds of things. And then you have the risk of them crashing and getting injured on a bike when they're not used to riding a bike. So it really depends on the individual. Me personally, I like to mix the bike in. I always have. I came from a mountain biking background, cycling background before ultra running. I was primarily a cyclist and climber. And I felt like ultra running kind of brought those two disciplines together, light and fast in the mountains and no restrictions. because you're on foot. But I do use that in coaching. If they are cycling or they have dabbled in cycling, we try to mix in a % of volume on the bike. It's a great way to really stay in a strong zone 2 workout, especially after bigger workouts. So like say a speed workout or another strategic speed workout. So one may be running and one may be cycling. So you have less chance of injury, but you get more quality work. And the other way I like to use it personally is as a go-to if you're feeling niggles or beat up. Get on the bike instead of a run, like replace it on the fly. So they have the flexibility to do that. We talk about the training plan being custom to them, but a general guideline, and they need to listen to their body and be willing to pivot and listen and give themselves some grace on days where they can go and ride their bike instead of run if they're feeling beat up. Another great way to use the bike, I find, and I'm going to talk about the bike because that's what I use and that's what I love. I feel like it really carries over. And a lot of like elite ultra runners use the bike for extra volume. Killian does, David Roche does, I do know that like Ryan Sands has over the years. So when you look at like kind of people that have been in the sport a while, like Killian and folks like that, they are mixing the bike in for extra volume and to like get through things where they like might have a sore Achilles and they need to like give the body a break, but they don't want to lose their fitness. And so the other way we use it is like a long high zone 2 workout. So you might be going, if you went and did back to backs, like say someone's injury prone, let's say, we might do a long run. And then the next day, the typical thing is to do a back-to-back long run when you're in kind of peak volume phase for training and ultras, or that's kind of like passed around a lot in our community, right? As like, you should do this. I'd rather see someone do a long run on a day, and then the next day they're kind of have a sloppy, crappy workout. It's not going to be that great. It's going to be pretty easy. They're going to feel pretty beat up. But if we get them back out on the bike for 3 hours, they could push high zone 2 the entire time with a high cadence, and they would feel better after the workout, and they wouldn't be that beat up, and they'll get that benefit.
So would you say that you're seeing mileage swap from maybe on foot to the bike? And again, each athlete's going to have their own take. It could be at any age that this could happen. I'm just, as we think about time going on, I've found myself wanting to be on the bike on days where I feel more beat up. And I don't come from a cycling background. I had to like figure out how to ride a bike. So I had another option.
Well, I think a lot of people will have an injury at some point in their career and they're forced to go buy a bike or something, I think the other thing they can use is hiking or cross training in a gym, like elliptical things, ski erg, stuff like that. I mean, you could do that kind of stuff. It's not as sweet and cool as going out on like a gravel. No, it's not as fun as a gravel bike. I mean, I guess I would say this to the listeners. The one thing I do caution athletes, road bike's my last choice because it's so sketchy. Like your risk of injury goes way up on a road bike, like way high. It's probably one of the highest high risk categories for injury because of accidents, because cars just don't see you and everybody's distracted on their phone, even though they're not technically supposed to be on their phone. Everyone's still on their phone at times on the road. So I prefer a gravel bike, an older mountain bike that you might put, slicks on, stuff like that. So that way you could get out, you could trailhead commute with it. You could just cruise around town on it and just do like neighborhood cruises, stuff like that. Simple things, flat pedals, very simple, wider tires so you don't fall over or slide out in a gravelly slick section, just trying to keep things safe.
Jeff, I agree with you. I was putting in high mileage, but had to go to the bike because I didn't have much left of my body. I couldn't put any more miles in without risk of injury. So I transitioned to do a combination of the two. And as a result, not only did I keep healthier legs, but I developed strength in my quads that I didn't have from just running. And all of a sudden I felt like below my waist, I was more of a machine down there instead of a one-sided machine. It was really good for me for muscular development and creating a complete system. It was an eye opener. I was really surprised that happened.
Hey, Jeff, I'm curious. The logic would say as we get older, we have a longer recovery time or more difficulty to recover from a hard workout. And that's kind of the truth that I have in my mind. But as you're talking about this, I'm thinking if you're training smarter, maybe as you age, you can get better and more efficient at recovery. Is that what you find in your coaching clients? That we can actually train our body to be more efficient recovering by the types of workouts we do? Or is it a linear graph that as we age, our recovery slows?
I would argue most of your recovery is coming from mobility and nutrition, not workouts, because that's one thing everyone overlooks. Everybody focuses on working out, and it's actually nutrition and mobility and strength, I think, that helps you be resilient and gives you the resources you need. And it helps you explore, like with mobility work, it's going to help you explore where, like, oh, my right calf is tight before it trickles down into your Achilles, and then you have a chronic Achilles issue, right? Or my hip flexor from doing Cobra, oh man, my hip flexors are really tight. I need to spend a little more time on those. So for me, I do a 10-minute mobility routine, a minimum of 3 times a week. I always do it when I do my 3 strength sessions a week. So a minimum of 3 days a week, I'm doing some kind of mobility work to explore where I'm tight so I can head things off at the pass. And keep really good movement patterns, but also because one of the things that happens as we age, we lose our range of motion. So that means it's slower on downhills. If we kick a rock and go flying down the trail, we're going to kiss dirt instead of being able to pull out of it, for example. And then the other thing is nutrition and high protein as we age, because high animal proteins, because they're more bioavailable. And if you're a vegetarian out there, you need to double your protein based on the recommendations I'm going to give for animal proteins. So that's a minimum of gram per pound of body weight per day. That's your minimum baseline. On a bigger day, it's probably be 1.2 to 1.3 grams per pound of body weight. And if you're a vegetarian, that needs to be double that number, or at least 1.5 of that number, because the bioavailability and absorption of those vegetarian sources of protein, there's a lot of anti-nutrients in them, and you don't actually you only have about less than 50% bioavailability of those vegetarian sources of proteins. So whenever we have vegetarian athletes, we really have to have a long discussion about bioavailability, because they'll be like, oh, I'm getting plenty of protein. It's like, no, you're not. It's not bioavailable. So we need to have those discussions so they're educated on actually what they're putting in their body.
Boy, just on that last comment you made, I came up with like 10 questions, but I'm going to start with the easy one. And that is, tell us what mobility is. I've heard that term many, many times. We know it's important. Is it stretching, or is mobility different than stretching? Give us some examples, a definition and some examples of what is this mobility training that you do 3 times a week.
Active stretching. So think like yoga style moves. I am very time efficient with my stuff, so I can't go to an hour yoga class. I'm not going to have that kind of time in my day with a full-time coaching load and training. So for me, it's a 10-minute routine. It's about 10 moves. I'm doing each one in a one set, say, of 12 moves of that move, or 12 reps of that move. And I'm spending about an exhale or 2 or 3 within the move, right? So I'm counting my exhales and how many I'm doing. So for example, it's a progression workout for me. So I would start with like cat cow, and then I would move to down dog to cobra. And then between those two, I might throw in push-ups with it as a warm-up for strength. So in between, or a push-up plank where you'd hold a plank in a push-up position. So there's some core work mixed in. Then I would move to like mountain climber lunges, where I lunge up and then reach to the sky. I'm moving my neck and shoulders and everything. So I'm keeping really good range of motion through my upper body too. I'm trying to work on upper body and lower body and midsection. And then, I'd work in the 90-90s. So you work in hip mobility. I even mix in some like leg raises where you're in the 90-90. So your back foot's coming off the ground. So you're doing hip mobility. Then I go to quad stretch against a wall where you're doing a forward lunge, like on a knee. If everybody's ever seen the couch stretch, sofa stretch for your quad, it's similar, but against a wall. What else? Side lunges and ATG split squat. ATG split squat's a big one. In my 50s, I felt like I was losing range of motion and good downhill speed. And I started working about 2 years ago. I really started working on ATG split squat 3 days a week, and which is kind of the knees over toes move, and to really work on ankle flexion and knee strength in the full deep lunge, where the knee's jutting way out over the toe. Like, at least we say a good knee flexion and ankle flexion with your foot flat on the ground when you're in that deep lunge should be a full hand width in front of your knee, of front of your toes. Most runners are not going to have that kind of mobility. And that really improved my downhill running in my 50s. I got my speed back with that kind of move. And no knee pain either, because I'm always like making sure that I don't have any tightness there, right? So those are kind of what I'm talking about, I guess, when it comes to mobility, and because we lose that range of motion as we age, especially.
I want to ask both coaches, Jeff and Krissy, how many times or what when runners come to you new, are any of them doing mobility training? I do no mobility training whatsoever. I have done a little bit better on strength training because I know that as you age, you should get in the gym more and build lean muscle mass. But I don't do any mobility training. Is that something that is often overlooked by your clients?
Krissy, you want to answer that?
I think we both should take a turn. I feel like a lot of it, and I'll just put myself in the same camp. I love to run. And a lot of the runners that come, they just want to be told to go run more. And like when a coach says, "Hey, I need you to get in and do some strength training or find a yoga class or come up with a mobility training," they're like, "Wait, I thought I was going to be a runner." So I get it. And myself, I need to go to a class. I love listening to Bronco. I'm like, "Oh, I know all those moves. I could do that 10-minute thing." But I will go to a strength training class and pay someone to be as a part of a group and get that energy. And there's something for the soul that comes from that too. So I just encourage people to find this aspect in their training and then give them tools. Some people are self-motivated and can do this 3 times a week, 10 minutes before their strength training, like Jeff. And then some people need that external like motivation, and it still needs to happen. I definitely think it's something I have to help encourage people. What about you, Bronco?
Well, we prescribe it in coaching. All our coaches do. I have a 10-minute routine with a video, and that we ask them to do that as a bare minimum. If they, I have some that like to do like pliability app. I have an older 60 plus runner that does 25 minutes of pliability. It's an app on your phone that you can buy a subscription to, and it gives you all these like routines. They're all about 20 to 25 minutes. He does that every single day, plus an extra core workout every single day, because he's had a problem with a lean in the past. And we've kind of fixed it with pliability and electrolyte balance and dialing in his electrolytes and potassium, and then also with more core strength. So I would argue that you need mobility before strength, because if you're going into the weight room and doing a bunch of strength training without good movement patterns, you're going to just be reiterating your imbalances and your weaknesses because you're compensating. And most people are compensating in some factor or another, whether that's, letting the feet kind of slightly tilt out as they do squats, for example, because they don't have good ankle flexion. That's a good one to watch. That's why I like athletes to look in a mirror, make sure their big toes are pointed straight ahead and parallel when they're going down, and their knee is tracking over their second toe. Make sure their knees aren't jutting out, make sure their ankles aren't jutting out, to compensate for lack of mobility in the ankle, which causes major problems down the road. And you will find a ceiling with volume and stress on your body because you don't have good movement patterns, and you won't bounce back. Because then something else up the chain has to pick up the slack for that compensation. and then it stresses something else out. So mobility is a really important piece for longevity.
I feel
I'm
like
going to
that's
jump in. I'm
Okay.
going to jump in right before Krissy because I don't have a question. I just have a comment, and then
Same.
Krissy can follow up with her question. This bing, bing, bing. I don't know what kind of sound effect we're using now for our golden nuggets, but all this last 10 minutes of discussion is a huge gold nugget for me because I'm thinking, okay, I'm getting older. Maybe I'm not recovering as quickly as I used to when I was younger. And Jeff is saying, hey, maybe you need to work on 2 other variables that will help you recover quicker: mobility and nutrition. And although I watch what I eat, I'm not dialed in on my nutrition, and I definitely don't do mobility work. So if I change, this is the golden nugget, if I just change those 2 things, boy, I should be a better, happier runner, I think. So
Oh,
go
you'll
ahead,
recover
Chris.
faster, I guarantee you.
My
I want
golden
my money back if I don't.
No, I'll just I was going to quick summary. Gold nugget, call it out. Mobility
Yeah.
more important than weight training. Like if you're going to prioritize.
Wow.
And so I was right there with you on the ding, ding, ding. Like mobility first, weight training.
I should correct that statement. Strength is really important. It's extremely
Totally.
important. But mobility has to come before strength. So if you're not used to doing strength and you want to introduce it, you should introduce mobility, then strength. That's why I always do a mobility routine before I even do strength. Because if I went just straight into the weight room and started lifting, I'm going to have tight movement patterns and I won't have explored where my tightness is. But if I go do my 10-minute routine on the mat, I go, ooh, I need to spend a little more time on my right calf today before I lift. And then by the time I lift, everything's opened up.
Jeff, I've got to break things down because I'm a simpleton, and I start to think, putting more horsepower under the hood doesn't do me a lot of good if my car's out of alignment and the suspension is off. You've got to have a well-tuned suspension to match the horsepower. Get your suspension true, and then pile in the horsepower. But putting horsepower in something that isn't lined up, you're going to break something. And that's called a niggle or an injury in our case on the trail.
Yes.
Okay, I'm ready to turn this in another direction. You guys ready?
Yeah.
I'm ready.
Hey,
wait, have you stretched? Are you mobile enough to make a quick change?
My mobility? I was asking the mileage question however many minutes ago that was now.
We skirted around that.
Yeah, seeing the
I
mileage.
totally skirted it.
Yeah. And where I was going was into a mindset question because I'm having it, one for myself. I proved it to myself last year at High Lonesome. Not having as much mileage also messes with the mindset. So I know if I run a 50-mile race, like that was what got me ready. Or if I had done all this training, I knew what I was ready for. And so the physicality that I put myself through in my 20s and 30s that my body could easily endure also set up my mindset. Now with life factoring in and time, not having as much and still wanting to have touch points within my own racing experience as it's changing, I'm not running as far. And I have a really good friend that's like facing this right in this moment of, I know I didn't do a 50 miler before this 100 miler. Can I still do it? Am I still ready? So do you have I have my own. I would love to hear how you approach the mindset piece when it comes to, if somebody says, you've had me on the bike for, 30% of my training. How am I going to run 100 miles or a 200 miler when most of my training was on the bike? Do you have some tricks on that one?
Well, I would say, unless they're really fighting an injury, we don't have them a majority of their time on the bike. It's just a supplemental. So that way we're looking at like kind of where their ceiling is for healthy training. And then we're adding in some bike. Maybe we're subtracting a little bit of volume from their baseline training of volume on running, but then adding in that extra volume on the bike. So I think that's kind of how I look at it from a training perspective. Can we add that as, to get a little extra volume mixed in of safe zone 2s, low zone 3 heart rate training, and active recovery or added aerobic volume. So that's really how I'm thinking.
Mindset piece though. Like how do you play with their mind? Yeah.
Well, we look at the numbers. It's be like, okay, when you were just running, this is how much time you're spending. We're spending just as much volume or probably even more when we're mixing in the bike. And then we can talk them through and get them some confidence in that, I'll give them even a case study as far as myself. In the early days when I couldn't run high volume because I would get injured, I was putting the extra volume on the bike and I was still winning races. So we say you can still perform on less volume, but you have to look at your overall volume of what you're doing. Plus you're doing strength training, plus you're doing mobility, the amount of training a week they're doing in time versus, I need to chase this like volume running number. I think we try to gear them away and guide them away from that like chasing a number, and really look at like, how much time am I spending training? What can I afford with my lifestyle and job and family and any, all the other life, things they have to do that's going to take up time? What can we afford to do? And then we break that into what we can do.
Yeah. And if those numbers aren't the same as they were like in my 20s or my 30s, like life has some factors that there's other pieces that train us, right? There's staying up all night with a kiddo. There's doing a run and then playing Frisbee with your kid at a picnic. Like being aware of how all of life is a piece of or factors into these big events that we.
Well, and that's one of the reasons that I have tri-weekly phone calls with athletes that are scheduled. I want to talk in person or virtual in person, so I can get a feel for like where they are every 3 weeks. Like, where are you in life? What do you have coming up the next 3 weeks in the next 3 week block? Like, we're talking through like, okay, I've got, 3 business trips, to 3 different time zones, right? Or I'm traveling to Argentina on business. Like, we need to know those things so we can figure I'm going to have 12 hours on a flight, an international flight or whatever that is. Or you have a sick kid. There's things that pop up that you just you can't figure for all the time. And we have to have discussions around this of how to handle it. And also give yourself some grace. Be like, okay, this is a big stressor in your life right now. So that means we need to probably back off that week, like even if it wasn't expected. So if that business trip was thrown on at the last minute, well, hey, they need to text me. They need to know to text me. So we have that communication and say, hey, I unexpected business trip. I was supposed to do a volume week. What do I do? That's what individual coaching's for. It was like, okay, do this instead. And then we'll shift that volume week to another week.
Yeah, adjusting for life.
And just because you can't get those high mileage that you were getting in the 20s, I think the great equalizer is experience. You can start to pull in resources and decisions on the trail as long as you put that bib on with the confidence that you can get your way out of whatever comes at you and adjust your race in real time. That's a great equalizer that they can bridge a lot of those missed miles or shorter miles that you're thinking that you're up against. That's just my thoughts.
I agree 100%. Like, that's why I guess I'm getting into that mindset piece a bit of how do you have the conversation with yourself or with your coach, if you choose to have a coach, that like knowing that this is so much more powerful than any miles. And if you tell yourself, I don't have enough miles, you won't have enough miles. Tell
That's
yourself,
right.
like last year with High Lonesome, I have 20 years of experience. Sure, I haven't run more than 50 miles this week, a week for a couple of years now, but here we go. I've got 20 years of experience. I'm going to get myself to that High Lonesome finish line. Jeff and I were also at High Lonesome last year. We have a lot of overlap on those things.
Yeah, and somehow I missed you at Hard Rock this year.
I know, I missed you. I am in Buena Vista now, getting ready to pace at High Lonesome this weekend. So
I backed out, if you didn't know. So I will not be.
You're not running this year, right on.
Yeah, I was supposed to, but I backed out because of my ankle. I need to rehab.
Good point. Do you guys have any questions, follow up on mileage or mindset?
Yeah, I have one, Jeff. If you were to, and I know the answer is it depends, but if you were to take and bucket your athletes into decades, okay, you got your 20-year-olds, your 30-year-olds, your 40-year-olds on up. What are some of the trends as people age? So all things equal, let's say stress levels, all that sort of stuff is relatively equal. Would you say that there's a bell curve where you start with mileage, low mileage, and work up into the 30s and 40s, and then down as they age? Or do you start high when you're in your 20s and drop that down? Or how does that bell curve look? So I know you're going to say, well, it depends. This is
It really does
coaching
depend.
is an individual thing, but I'm asking for generalities here.
Well, I think if you've been a high mileage runner in the past and you can handle high mileage, let's put you in low mileage, high mileage. Let's just make it easy.
Okay.
High mileage runner, I would say, can do that for quite a while. I'm still pushing 100-mile weeks at times in peak blocks.
Wow.
But there's another 3 or 4 hours on the bike on top of that. So I'm always mixing in the bike, either 1 to 2 hours a week up to like 4 or 5 hours a week, depending on the week. And then so those people can do high mileage for a while. They just have to have the motivation to do it. That's the hardest part as you age, to do it, year in, year out, decade in, decade out, like just for me to be in 25 years, like I couldn't really run 100-mile weeks until about 15 years in the sport, because I came from a cycling background and I was just a recreational runner on the side. So like 3 or 4 days a week with my dog, 20, 30 minutes. So it wasn't like I was a big runner, but I always had done it as just kind of a fitness thing. So, and then there's the low volume runners where they need to be doing other cross training things. But if they did bump up their mileage, they'd probably get injured. So we need to find another outlet for them to build endurance and aerobic base, to add to that aerobic base if they have the bandwidth. And then now if we get down to no bandwidth, then we need to do whatever we can to get them like ready, and then give them the confidence that they're ready, that they can handle it.
Dang, this is every time you talk, Jeff, a new question pops up in my head. So I apologize if I'm monopolizing the conversation. You mentioned motivation over the years. How do you coach that as people are
you can't coach motivation. Aging? You either have it or you don't. Like
Tell me about you. How do you maintain motivation through the decades?
I can't sit still. I love running in the woods. That's my me time. That's my alone time. That's my think through my problems in life, reflect, learn on podcasts, whatever it is. It's like my time to just do what Jeff wants to do. And think about what Jeff wants to think about, whether it's business, whether it's coaching, whether it's my training, whether it's being a dad or a husband, or my lacking as a dad or a husband, and where I need to make improvements, or where, there's always that. You should be reflecting all the time, and looking inward and what am I doing wrong in my life right now, and try to improve it. So, but for me, that is my time, and I've also created a lifestyle habit out of the years, more and more time to it, and then I've evolved my career into coaching and athlete, and that became a career, and so then there's more time for that pastime. I still like the performance side. I'm still motivated to do the hard work and do speed work and run up mountains really hard, and into oxygen debt and all those kinds of hard workouts. I still like lifting in the gym. I like doing heavy workouts. I'm super sore today because I just got back from a week at Hard Rock and then Western States, and I was tapering, so I didn't do a lot of lifting. So yesterday was my kickoff back into strength training, and I did a hard powerlifting workout for my upper body, lower body, and a long core workout. So I'm sore everywhere today, and it's going to be way worse tomorrow. I'm going to be gimping around tomorrow, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, I'm motivated, and you can't coach that. One thing that coaching has taught me, and Krissy could probably back me up on this, is when when you have an athlete that is self-motivated, and one that's like looking for coaching to be the motivator. And it's really not, because it has to come from within, you know, and that's just the writing on the wall that they're either going to they're only gonna hit like 50% of the workouts that you prescribe because they'll find excuses, or they'll just won't last very long with coaching. And that's okay. I would love to help them with that. And we try to work on mindset, but some people either want to make the change. You have to, like I said at the beginning, you have to have the revelation to make a life change. And so you have to be motivated to do the work. You have to want to get out I always look at it as mindset training too. So we try to guide athletes in mindset training as well, right? Neuroscience shows us that if we, intentionally do something that's different from what our automated is, we build a new neural pathway and we unglue the old one, right? So we build a tree-like structure in our brain. We send proteins to it to make it thicker branches and all those things. So for example, if I look outside and it's snowing and I go, I'm just going to run on the treadmill, or I'm not going to do the workout today, then I am choosing to have a weaker mindset. But if I gear up, layer up, and I go outside and I slog that workout out, guess what? I just got way thicker branches. I sent proteins to make me tougher, even though it was really tough. And those are the times when you should learn to embrace the suck. You should be like, you know what? This is mindset training right now. Like, am I going to go out the door, or am I going to blow this workout off? And then I always choose to go out the door. And sometimes it's just 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I think one thing I like to quote over and over, and the first book I ever got a hold of for training, before the internet was like full of this kind of stuff, in the early days of ultra running, I was looking for some training stuff, and I found the Lydiard method. Arthur Lydiard from New Zealand, famous coach. So he had a great quote. I highlighted it in the book I have. My wife found it at a garage sale. That was my first training book. It said 15 minutes is of value. And so if you're not motivated to go out, if you're having trouble with motivation, and you say, okay, I got an hour and a half workout, I got to go do this run, and then you go, you know what? I'm just going to run 15 minutes. So if you go out the door for 15 minutes, one, it's of value if you only run 15 minutes, because it's enough to get a little bit of adaptation and check the box for running that day, right? For the body to go, okay, we ran, right? It also builds a new neural pathway of mental toughness to get you out the door. And then the other thing that will happen is you probably will warm up in 10 minutes and you'll end up running 45 minutes or an hour, or even that whole hour and a half workout. So you're going to get benefit from it. And then eventually, as you do that over and over and over again, and as you build that neural pathway thicker and thicker and thicker branches, you don't even you barely even have the argument with yourself. You go, I don't really feel like it, but I'm glad but I should do it because I know I'm going to benefit. Boom, out the door.
Jeff, I'm pretty sure you just coached motivation. Like that. I feel like you're right.
Touche, Krissy.
100%. I was just, because when you first said you can't coach motivation, and then you went through this whole thing, I was sitting going, no, I'm pretty sure that's our job as a coach, is to help them find it internally. And then you just showed this whole scientific way of how to find it internally.
You can guide them in the concepts, I should say, but you can't.
Exactly.
You cannot make them go out the door. They have to make that little, it's a crossroads, and in that moment, they got to make the decision.
Yes. Yeah, but find on what it is, like help them draw out from what, because why did you hire me? Why are you spending money on me if you don't have the thing that's going to get you out the door? So let me help you find that. And I love the science side to it too, though.
You know what? I heard that I really like, Jeff. Go ahead, Scott.
No, go ahead.
Oh,
you do.
The one thing I heard you say that I really liked is you said mental training doesn't happen just on the trail. It happens every situation in life. Maybe when the alarm goes off, that's part of mental training. Maybe when you're making a choice of what to eat, good or bad, that's mental training. And I would bet with these branches that you say are growing thicker in the brain, when you're sitting at an aid station trying to figure out whether to cut the band or to move on, or whatever you're up against on the trail, you probably use that same neural pathway that you've developed in all of these other things throughout your day. So, trail running can be, all day long in some different ways, whether it's stretching, mobility, strength training, but mental training, which is my favorite topic, is out there looking at us all the time. So I like that.
Absolutely.
I had one pushback, and it's not that's right or wrong or whatever, just like to bring up the conversation, because I wanted to get into differences in coaching for feminine and masculine, or men and women, or across genders, if that impacts how you train. But the pushback piece was when you said that like you always have to get out the door. And I would say there are times when you have to be able to listen to your body and not go out the door at the risk of injury, or when do you, how do we help people decipher the overdoing it? We don't want to get into overtraining syndrome, and knowing your body well enough to be like, okay, today is an okay day for me to call it a rest day, and I will get this in the next day. So I play with that a lot because I want people to trust what their body's telling them. And is it just a laziness, like using that word, or is it, this is what I really need to do for my whole being today to feel not like I'm overriding something that's really important?
Jeff, I want to hear your answer. I want to say that that's mental training too, though, not to push yourself out, but to hold yourself back. You can spin it any way you want to fit, the square into the circle. You can make it fit. But Jeff, I want to hear your answer to what Krissy said, because I think we're all challenged with that.
Well, I think going back to my earlier statement of we tell athletes that the training is a general guideline, and we need to be able to evolve on the fly depending on how we're feeling. Now, if it's an athlete who has trouble hitting their workouts, then it's a motivation issue. But if it's someone who's pretty consistent and then they take a day to rest, that's smart. So there's a fine line there. So I guess the answer is it depends again. But I do think that there's instances when you should take a rest day, or you should take a cross training day or an easy day. But that's why I say 15 minutes is of value, because if you just go out and work out for 15 minutes when you're feeling a little beat up, it's probably going to be good for you to flush things out. Now, it's a different story if we're dealing with a niggle. That's a whole nother conversation. We're just talking about motivation right now in training. But if there's an injury involved or a potential injury involved, this is a totally different discussion.
Knowing when to not turn a niggle into an injury by, I would say, changing the focus to what would be helpful today. Yes, you still have training time. We had an hour blocked here for training time. Maybe a run isn't the best thing. Is the bike better? Is mobility training kind of rejiggering and pushing around?
Yes.
Yes.
I want to throw the same question to you.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Jeff. You go ahead.
I was going to say, this is where I have a thing called the 2-day rule. If you have a niggle, do cross training, something that does not aggravate it, for 2 days, and then go test it on day 3. If it's still there, 2-day rule is still in effect. Go back to cross training for 2 days that doesn't aggravate it, and then so on until you're back to running easy. And that test run should be either on a treadmill or around the block of your house, so you don't get dedicated to a 5-mile loop when it flares back up, and then you have to limp home. So you can just bail on the workout and go cross train.
Who would have thought I would have spoke over that great comment with my question that was coming up? But that was one of those, what Scott calls golden nuggets. It was one of those. Thanks, Jeff. Yeah. My question was going to be, what I was going to interrupt that with is, Krissy, how do you keep your motivation? We heard from Jeff. Because you've been out there and doing it and continue to do it at a high level. What motivates you?
Very similar in terms of just loving to be outside. I would say I've stayed very competitive for 2 decades, for 20 years. And I had a very significant moment where I was like, and I'm done. And it felt like call it a mic drop moment when I was in China and won the Gaoligong. That was at 40 years old. And it's one of those questions that we've talked about on some of the previous episodes when it comes to this big hormonal shift that women go through in their 40s. And the more I research it, it seems to be aligning with why things might have just kind of turned off. And I have this feeling now, I think good almost 10 years into transition, like shifting, whatever this is going to do to me. And I'm having this glimmer of what happens when life kind of, well, basically my hormones are going to bottom out. And so what happens when I'm not going through massive flux? And this flux is adaptation. My body is adapting to a new being. And I don't think it's better or worse or whatever. It's just new. And there are some lovely blessings to what is happening to my body and mind. I would say my mindset is shifting as well. So motivation is changing is the answer to your question. It's always driven by time outside. And I've noticed that in my physicality, some days not feeling like I actually can train as much as I used to, my mental health suffers for it. So finding different ways, like I bought a gravel bike one winter because I didn't want to run in the rain anymore. I was just 100% done training in the Pacific Northwest 20 years through the winter. I wasn't going to do it. Everybody will look at you and go, biking in the rain is way more like mentally tough than running.
Mm-hmm.
But at that year, I had so much fun throwing on my full Gore-Tex and just finding a different way to be outside. And I think we actually talked about that with Celine and motivation, like finding something else in the meantime, or maybe for the next time to shift what's getting you, for me, getting out the door. So outside is a big motivation, acknowledging that my body is going through a massive adaptation and being okay that maybe right now is not my time to race hard. And then kind of holding hope for what this new coming out of a chrysalis, basically. What is that going to look like in, I don't know how many years. We'll see. But do you have any thoughts?
Jeff?
Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. And ask your question.
Or whatever, but I was just going to say, do you notice differences in women and their training or like your number of clients? That's what I'm wondering is like, is there this pause where women kind of aren't going as hard and then they come back online? Have you noticed anything like that?
I noticed that some of the competitive women tend to have a really struggle few years if they're still trying to be competitive. When they move into their 40s, it can be a little struggle because, like you said, things are changing and hormones are a little out of whack and just different. And the reality is different too, with like weight gain and all kinds of things. So we definitely coach our female athletes differently than we do our male athletes, especially if they're in 40 plus. Things that are consistent is high protein, but we use something called fuel separation method for the women versus like maybe more of a traditional OFM approach for the men from a dietary perspective to keep their hormones regulated. And then the other is making sure we're training women around their cycle. Awesome. Much like the book Roar, if anybody's read that book, I think there's a few points out of that came out for me as a coach and really helped to kind of guide me in my strategy for training women. And that is, if they're willing to share in Training Peaks their cycle, then I can write my quality work versus aerobic base work around the cycle and then talk them off the ledge when they're really in the second half of the cycle, that day, 15 to 28, and we can really start talking about like, hey, you know what, you don't have as much oxygen around right now. You're going to feel unfit. This is normal. It's going to pass, right? All those things that like get in your head. It's a mental thing that really starts to get in your head because you're doing workouts and you're like questioning your coach, you're questioning the workouts, you're questioning life, you're questioning your career as an ultra runner. Like, why am I even in this stupid sport? And when we can just say, hey, let's keep this in perspective. What day is it in your cycle? Okay, yes. So these are the things that are happening to you right now hormonally, and your hormones are really high, and that's normal. And your oxygen carrying capacity is low right now, so you feel unfit. So we can give them workouts that are appropriate for that phase and not train them like a dude, like it's always been traditionally done. And that's like 3 weeks on, 1 week off, 3 weeks on, 1 week off, right? When we might be putting them through speed work in the second half of their cycle.
And that's someone that's on a 28-day cycle. And then you throw perimenopause on when those cycles go 60 days, 15 days, 10 days, 70 days, like having those reference points, I think, is pretty nice for a coach. I do the same thing, having that like conversation and noticing where things are shifting.
Yeah, and
Where
sometimes
if you're on
diet.
changing.
Well, one thing I would say is sometimes a tweak in diet can really help with that cycle when they're going through perimenopause. You know, I have a wife who's going through that right now, and one of the things we found, and our friends that are going through it, because this is our age group, it is that we found that the fuel separation method really helps in perimenopause with like regulating hormones for women, and I think because there'll be a tendency to like kind of mess your macros up that would help regulate hormones.
Can you explain what you mean by fuel separation? Maybe I missed that.
Sure. So I'll try to give you a quick definition here. It's basically taking protein as a constant, meaning, you know, our protein intake is a constant, and 3 main meals a day, or 4 if you're an ultra runner, might be a 4th meal. But the meals are 3 to 5 hours apart, no snacking. Okay? Because one of the things that happens in perimenopause is women put on weight. And it's really frustrating. Everything they've always done doesn't work anymore. Okay? So the protein's a constant, and the protein drives the pairing of the energy macro. And the 2 energy macros are either fat or carbohydrate. So if you look at that, you say, okay, if I'm having a fatty protein like steak, oily fish like salmon, eggs, something with naturally fat in it, then it would pair with a low carb side. So because fat is the macro. So you could add fat to your low carb, like you could have a salad with like, you know, avocado oil dressing and avocado and olives and feta cheese and everything else on it and nuts. But then it's naturally a low carb because fat is the energy macro. So when we say fuel separation method, it means separating carbohydrates and fat. Okay. But we're having both because we need to have fatty meals because that's going to help A, D, E, and K vitamins because they're fat soluble vitamins. It's going to help them absorb. It's going to signal to the body and saturate the system. And really they're satisfying meals. And they're going to be high in iron because you might be having some red meat. They're going to be high in omega-3s and things like that. So we're always making sure that we have at least one of those meals a day. And then the other would be like a lean protein, you know, chicken tenders, skinless chicken breasts that are tuna, which are all lean proteins. There's very little fat in them. And so they would be paired with carbohydrate, whether that's fruit or starch like potatoes or white rice or something like that. And so that way they're always mixing it up. The carbohydrates signal to the female system to like regulate hormones, and the other helps them like be satisfied, get some satiety in their meals, and also absorb A, D, E, and K. So we're trying to always like mix those meals up. So, and then what happens when you separate those fuels, all of a sudden, one, they lose weight. If they have gained a little weight in perimenopause, they get back down lean again to where they want to be. And then the other thing we found is if they're in a big training volume, we can strategically have combo meals, which would be fat and carbohydrate and protein, all the macros, right? Combo meals, all the macros. So then we can have all of them strategically around big efforts. Big long run, come home, have a combo meal. You eat fat, you eat carbohydrate, you eat lots of protein, and you have a huge meal because you just worked the crap out of your system and you need to recover and you need all the resources to signal to the body. Okay. But we're doing it strategically. We're not doing it, you know, every meal. We're really targeting different phases and then different meals and then not snacking in between. And that also allows migrating motor complex to happen. And if anybody's not familiar with that, it's kind of the research came out of Colorado State University, and it's the growling that we get in our stomach. Everybody calls it hunger pangs, but it's not hunger pangs. It's actually, that's a lie. Misinformation, I would say. It's actually contractions in your GI tract when you haven't put anything into digestion for 2 to 4 hours. And it only happens after nothing's in digestion. It can have liquid in digestion, but it can't have calories in digestion. So as soon as you eat a peanut, the body goes all hands on deck, back to digestion. But if you don't have anything in digestion for at least 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours, depending on the complexity of the food, then you start getting slight growly in your stomach, and that those contractions are cleansing waste from digestion. But if you never do that, you always have just sludge in the GI tract. So you want to embrace that growly stomach for a little bit before you have your meal. So that's why we recommend to athletes, one, we want to have this cleansing mechanism that kicks in at least once a day, where you're not having food and digestion for 3 or 4 hours. And that's why we say don't eat inside of 3 hours, but really don't go more than 5 or 6 hours without eating. So you're always having a meal, but you're not having a bunch of snacking. Chronic snacking is not a good idea.
Well, just to clarify, you would still have somebody fuel immediately after a run. You're not saying to have a long window.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Just to, I wouldn't want somebody like, oh, I did my long run, now I have to wait 3 hours. Like, no.
But just thinking through like your general daily nutrition, that snacking is kind of not great for us. We're really come from a hunter-gatherer background, and we went quite a bit of time between meals, and our bodies are built to have this cleansing mechanism in between.
I have a final question before we close, at least before I close. And my observation, I'll start with the observation that as I'm hearing the aging athlete piece, I hear it as, giving you patience to the process, understanding the process, not judging yourself against your yesterday's logbook, because you just can't do that. It's, you were younger then, you were faster then, you had more lean muscle mass or more efficient tendons and more bounce in your step than you do when you're older. So you got to give yourself some grace and understand the big picture. So I hear that. Now my selfish question for you, Bronco Billy, is on the intro, I said a tactical, brilliant racer. And if I would kick myself if I didn't ask this question, I'm sure there's somebody else that would say, I'm glad he asked that question. Well, Bronco Billy right now is in 15th place. He's right where he wants to be because he's measured himself. He can turn it on. He'll close those gaps. Talk to us about how your mindset, how are you let yourself lay back in the field and then push forward for a better position? What's going on in that moment in your race?
Well, I've always, it's fun to catch people versus being caught.
Yes.
One, for your mindset and ego alone. But I do think that starting in appropriate effort early, knowing that you can't, if you burn too many matches early, you're really going to, if you look at even splits of elite runners, they go out so hard now, especially now. And then they fade so much in the second half compared to the first half of, say, 100 miler. And I've always, I got hold of this from Matt Carpenter when I followed his blog when he got the Leadville course record in 2005. I was following along those years where he was running Leadville and dabbling in ultras. And one of the things he said stuck out to me, and that was in ultras, in 100 milers, I don't think you can run a negative split, but you can come close. Meaning there's enough fatigue in the second half that you are going to slow down. But that slowing down should be less than 30 minutes. So I've always judged my efforts, if that course is kind of similar in technicality and difficulty, first half, second half. Sometimes we can have front end loaded, back end loaded courses. But generally, I judge my effort on did I nail that race by how much, I didn't slow down very much. So, for example, Cocodona 250 in 2024, even with the breathing issues, which I should have been able to close at least an hour and a half faster if I hadn't had those in the last 80 miles, I only slowed down 4%.
Mm-hmm.
And so I look for try to slow down less than or around 5%. So it's kind of a goal for me. So that's kind of how I think about pacing. That's how I think about my first half, second half. And then when I tie it to RPE, for me, I would say the first third is a solid RPE 3. And then the middle is RPE 4 and last is RPE 5 on effort, meaning your effort has to go up for your pace to kind of almost maintain or not slow down too much. So you have to find that thing in your head that keeps you motivated. Part of that's like positive internal speak. Some of that's positive external speak. So talking to yourself in third person, like, Bronco, you can do this. You know, come on. And you know, so and there has been some research on this, on mindset, like speaking to yourself in third person, not like I can do this, but you can do this, you know, come on, buddy. Even though you're talking to yourself. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, does that answer your question?
It did. It was beyond what I expected to get. I thought it was I like the RPE. Started a 3 to a 4 and a 5, but my pace is the same, but I'm pushing harder. And then the split at the beginning of an end. Bronco Billy's in 15th. It's exactly where he wants to be. He's going to close this thing. You'll see. You'll watch. That's what as a fan, that's what I used to hear and watch you in races.
Yeah, especially Western States.
Yeah.
Our good buddy Rock Horton had the spreading the peanut butter analogy of this same thing. And all your training, your race, your resting, your nutrition, everything you've done in the 6, 8, 10 months leading up to said 100-miler, you take a knife and you get to carve all the peanut butter out of the jar, and it's sitting on that knife, and the race is the piece of hot toast. And if you lay down that peanut butter all on the front, you're going to be scraping toast at the end. But if you go too thin on the beginning and then you've got this big old glob at the end, that doesn't feel great either. So how do you spread the peanut butter evenly over? And I think you just gave a great analogy on how to do that, changing your RPE throughout the race.
Yeah.
And might I suggest this is the peak end of the podcast, because not only is that a great metaphor for racing, but maybe even how we can age as athletes. Let's spread the peanut butter evenly. Let's not leave it all in the front end and then couch sit the rest of our retirement. Let's try to smooth the peanut butter through the years.
That's nice, Scott. That's nice.
Yeah. You see how I did that? Yeah. Hey, if you're interested in learning more about Bronco Billy, you can find him at giddyupultra.com. And of course, all these links will be in the show notes. You can find him and follow him on Instagram at GoBroncoBilly, or go to his YouTube channel where you can find him at GiddyUpUltra on YouTube. So thank you very much, Bronco Billy, Jeff Browning, for coming on and helping us understand how to adjust our efforts through our aging years.
Scott, he was dropping golden nuggets, and the three of us were behind just picking them up as he dropped them off.
My back hurts. I need to do some mobility training now that I have all these golden nuggets in my hydration pack.
I was thinking strength.
You just need planks and glute bridges. Your low back will be a lot stronger.
Thanks, Bronco. It means a lot to have you on with this.
Yeah, Krissy, it was great to see you. Thanks, everybody.
So do a downward dog after you lace up your shoes, and then when the gun goes off, go out and run.
Mas.